As demand for pure blood transfusions rises, roadblocks continue to challenge fulfillment. Man, didn't I warn about this on my old channel back when everyone was getting the jab and stuff, and I refused to get the jab, and I was like, I warned that, hey, people are going to be wanting my pure blood soon. People are going to be asking for it. They're going to be paying premium for pure blood, like pure-blooded people like myself that refuse to get the jab because it'll come out sooner. It'll come out sooner rather than later that the COVID jab was a mistake. People will finally figure that out, and people will be wanting blood transfusions without the tainted jab in it. I've warned about it. It's here now, so we're going to dive into it. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button. Share this out so we can get this important information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. There you'll find a link to my Patreon. That's where I talk about things that I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my X account, so follow me there as well. Also, hit that hype button so I can so some of this information can be pushed through the algorithm as well. All right, so let's get into this news. Now, this comes from Patriot TV, and they report that a growing number of patients, particularly parents of young children, are insisting on blood transfusions only from donors who never received the COVID-19 shots. Legacy media and the scientific community are doing everything they can to downplay concerns and ridicule those who want pure blood to be used on their family members. A new Vanderbilt University study highlights the practical consequences: delays in care, strained hospital resources, and in at least 2 documented cases, patients who grew significantly sicker after refusing standard blood products. But I don't blame them for that. I don't blame them for that. I blame the system for mandating people get the jab. Like you couldn't travel if you didn't get the jab in some places. You couldn't buy products if you didn't get the jab in some places. You couldn't work if you didn't get the jab in some places. And these were Democrat ran states that had these policies in place. So people felt like they had to get the jab, or they would, have some financial persecution behind it, which is just wrong. I spoke out against it back then. People have finally woken up to how ridiculous this whole thing was. But what began as understandable skepticism toward a rushed experimental vaccine has evolved into a quiet but persistent challenge to the medical establishment's assurances about blood safety. The Vanderbilt researchers examined 15 requests for unvaccinated blood between January 2024 and December 2025. The median patient age was just 17, with more than half children. Most families sought directed donations from relatives. A practice the study noted carries its own risk because first-time donors are statistically more likely to harbor undetected pathogens. What? Then just test the blood. Like, what are you talking about? I don't understand what the problem is there. 2 patients who declined standard transfusions developed serious complications. One severe anemia, the other hyperdynamic shock that threatened organ failure. The authors concluded that these demands, while framed as a quest for safety, were paradoxically associated with worse outcomes, inefficiencies, and unnecessary escalation of care. Yet the deeper story is not merely about logistics or rare complications. It reflects a profound and lingering distrust in institutions that spent years pressuring, shaming, and sometimes coercing Americans into taking mRNA products whose long-term effects remain incompletely understood. I've talked about before, I've had many clients come to me and tell me about them getting pericarditis and myocarditis because of the jab. And no wonder why people no longer trust these health institutions, because they lied to us about all of those things. When families now ask for blood free of any potential spike protein or lipid nanoparticle residue, The response from much of the medical community is to label it fear culture or non-evidence based. That dismissal only deepens the skepticism it seems to quell. I mean, when we were first saying that the jab was harming some people, they said the same thing. Fear mongering, fear culture, non-evidence based. But when you look at the studies, the evidence did show some of those things that we were talking about. A lot of those things, actually, who we were warning about. Well, Vanderbilt recorded 15 requests for unvaccinated blood over 2 years, mostly involving pediatric patients. 13 cases involved directed donations from family members which carry risks of undetected pathogens. Only 15? I mean, that's a small sample. That's a small sample size for a study. That's a very small sample size for a study. If I would have went, working on my doctorate, went and said, okay, I'm doing a study and I only have 15 cases, they would have told me, nah, go back to the drawing board, bruh. That's crazy. 15 sample size. At least 2 patients experienced clinical deterioration after refusing standard diffusions. No reliable tests exist to distinguish vaccinated from unvaccinated donor bloods, as antibodies can result from infection or vaccination. So you have to ask people point blank, have you been jabbed or not? Professional organizations and regulators continue to oppose labeling or separating blood by vaccination status. Excuse me. Some states have considered legislation for unvaccinated blood banks, but none have passed. Directed donations represent a tiny fraction, about 0.06% of the overall U.S. blood supply. Concerns persist among some resources and clinicians about potential persistence of spike protein or other vaccine components in blood products. The official line, repeated by experts like Fox News medical analyst Mark Siegel and America's Blood Center's Vice President Diane Coleman, is that vaccination status makes no difference to transfusion safety. That's what they say. That's what they say. That's what the experts say, right? Blood centers do not track or disclose donor vaccination history, in multiple studies, including one from Kaiser Permanente, have found no increased risk in thrombosis, respiratory issues, or mortality from plasma or platelets of vaccinated or previous infected donors. Yet these assurances ring hollow for many, like myself, who witnessed the original vaccine rollout, complete with changing definitions of safe and effective. And they changed the definition of what a vaccine is as well. Suppress early treatment options and mounting reports of adverse events that regulators were slow to acknowledge. They outright wouldn't acknowledge. I would show the studies and they would not acknowledge the studies. I was getting strikes on YouTube. On my old channel, I was getting strikes from YouTube by just reading a study. I would literally read the study verbatim and I would get a strike for reporting on the study that was peer reviewed. Patients are not inventing risk out of thin air. Peer-reviewed papers, which I've covered a lot of them, have documented the passive transfer of SARS-CoV-2 spike antibodies through platelet transfusions. Sorry, can't read today. Other preprints and analysis have raised questions about the persistence of vaccine-derived genetic material or proteins in the bloodstream of recipients long after injection. So the spike proteins don't go away. While mainstream transfusion medicine maintains that these pose no meaningful threats to recipients, the absence of comprehensive long-term studies tracking every possible downstream effect fuels legitimate caution, especially when the stakes involve one's own child lying on any operating table. I mean, who wants to take that chance with their children, right? Directed donations, moreover, introduce variables that standard screen inventory avoids. First-time family donors may not meet the same rigorous repeat donor safety profile. Processing and capability checks add time that critically ill patients sometimes cannot afford. The Vanderbilt team rightly flags these practical harms, but the deeper institutional failure lies in how quickly authorities move from celebrating pandemic heroes to firing nurses and doctors who declined the shots, only to later confront a public that no longer trusts their pronouncements and blood purity. They did this to themselves. The medical industry did this to themselves. This tension exposes a larger cultural fracture. Medicine has always balanced patient autonomy with evidence-based practice, yet during the COVID era, autonomy was frequently sacrificed on the altar of public health compliance. Now, when wary individuals exercise that autonomy by requesting blood they believe carries fewer unknowns, the same institutions respond with policies that treat such requests as nuances rather than expressions of informed consent. The irony is sharp. The very distrust sown by mandates and censorship now complicates routine medical care. Families seeking unvaccinated blood are, in their own way, trying to foresee and avoid what they perceive as potential evil lingering from a novel medical intervention. And you can't blame them for that. This is logical, what the families are doing. Whether their specific fears prove fully justified or partially overstated, their caution reflects a hard-earned realism about centralized authority and pharmaceutical overreach, dismissing it or outright risk punishing the prudent along with the fearful. Hospitals and blood banks have served patients better by acknowledging the roots of this distrust rather than merely documenting its downstream inefficiencies. Of course, why would they? They would never, though. They would never acknowledge it. Acknowledge this distrust. They would never do that. They don't want anyone questioning their institutions. Transparent data on spike protein clearance, rigorous long-term surveillance and transfusion outcomes, and genuine respect for religious and conscience-based objections could go further towards rebuilding confidence than studies that frame patient choice as a problem, right? Right? We are supposed to be able to we're supposed to have informed consent. They inform you, and then when we don't give them consent, they get upset about it, right? Until then, the quiet demand for pure blood will likely continue, not as fringe hysteria, but as a rational response to a season when trust in medicine was badly damaged. The blood supply remains one of the modern medicine's quiet miracles, preserving both its safety and public's faith in it requires more humility than the current debate has shown. And that's the problem with these institutions. They have absolutely no humility. They still won't come out and admit that the lockdowns were harmful to people. They still won't come out and admit that the jab was harmful to the majority of the people. They still refuse to admit what the majority of the population already knows about this. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this. Leave y'all comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.